Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're doing something a little different. Well, not really different for us, but a deep dive.
A deep dive, yeah.
And it's going to be a deep dive into this guy, Guy Fisher.
Okay.
So have you heard of Guy Fisher?
I have not heard of Guy Fisher, no.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting because his story, I think, has a little bit of everything. We're going to be talking about organized crime,
Okay.
music,
Interesting.
and a little touch of Hollywood, right?
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's quite a combination.
Yeah, so we're going off of his Wikipedia page. And as everyone knows,
Yeah.
Wikipedia is like a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is.
So we're just going to kind of go where it takes us, and we're going to learn about this guy, Guy Fisher.
All right. I'm excited.
Yeah. So to start, he was born in New York City in 1947.
Okay.
And fast forward a few decades, maybe like 2-3 decades,
Okay.
he gets involved with this group called the Council.
The council.
Yes, and they were like this really powerful African-American crime organization.
Right.
And they were kind of like running things in Harlem, like a lot of the heroin trade
Yeah.
in the 70s, early 80s.
So this is a time when organized crime was very prevalent in a lot of American cities.
Yeah.
And I think the council is a really interesting example of how crime and power and, race and all these things kind of intersect.
Yeah, and they weren't just like pushing drugs. I mean, they were
Yeah.
kind of like they had their hands in everything.
It's like a shadow government.
Yeah, like
Or a parallel government, like you said,
right.
I mean, you have to think about what was happening in Harlem at that time. There was a lot of poverty, neglect from city officials,
Yeah.
and the council kind of stepped in and filled that void.
Right.
They provided, a sense of order, even social services in some cases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and for a lot of people, that was appealing.
Yeah, it's like they were filling this need,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Even if it was, through illegal means.
Exactly. And so you can't just look at them as criminals, right?
Right.
You have to understand the context of the environment that allowed them to gain this influence.
Yeah. So Fisher, he starts rising through the ranks of the council.
Okay.
And then he does something crazy. In 1977, he buys the Apollo Theater.
Whoa.
The Apollo Theater. Can you imagine?
The Apollo Theater, like the Apollo Theater.
Yes.
Wow, that's surprising.
Crazy, right? So, I mean,
So that really raises some questions about his motivations. I mean, was he genuinely, an appreciator of the arts?
right.
Was this like a money laundering scheme? Was it a power play? What
Yeah.
was going on?
It's hard to say. It's like he's this walking contradiction,
Yeah.
Like you have this crime lord who's also like this businessman, and he's like a patron of the arts. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It reminds me that people are rarely one-dimensional, right?
Yes.
Even someone who's involved in criminal activities
Right.
can have other interests, other motivations.
Right. Like what was going through his mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, did he think, oh, I'm going to take the Apollo Theater and turn it into some kind of criminal enterprise?
Right.
Or was he like, no, I really want to support Black culture and I want to like give back to the community?
Right.
It's hard to know.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that we're still asking these questions, right, all these years later,
Yeah.
really speaks to, the power of his story.
Yeah.
Well-
He embodies these contradictions of his time,
Yeah,
of Harlem, of America even, I think.
definitely.
So we've got this guy, he's running this criminal organization, he owns the Apollo Theater, like he's on top of the world, right?
Yeah, it seems like it.
But as we know, every rise has its fall.
Of course.
And in 1984, he gets arrested.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he's convicted on racketeering, drug trafficking,
Yeah.
even murder charges.
Wow. Okay, so before we move on, can we just unpack that term racketeering a little bit?
Yeah.
I think, sometimes these legal terms can be a little confusing.
Right.
Essentially, racketeering refers to a pattern of illegal activities that are carried out as part of an organized criminal enterprise.
Okay.
So it's not just like one isolated crime.
Gotcha.
It's about this ongoing criminal operation.
Okay. So they're basically saying that Fisher was the head honcho
Exactly.
of this whole operation, and that's why he gets hit with all these serious charges.
Exactly. And the evidence they used to build their case against him came from a pretty unlikely source.
Okay.
Leroy Nicky Barnes.
Leroy Nicky Barnes.
Yeah, you know him.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Barnes was actually a former mentor and rival to Fisher in the drug trade.
Wait, so his own mentor turned on him?
It's a pretty wild twist, right?
Right.
Adds this whole element of betrayal to the story. But what makes it even more complicated is that Barnes himself was serving a life sentence at the time.
Oh, wow.
So why would he testify against Fisher?
Yeah, what's his motivation?
That's the big question. So the official story is that Barnes felt betrayed by Fisher, both in terms of business and get this, a personal affair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Barnes claimed that Fisher had a relationship with his mistress,
What?
and that was the final straw for him.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, it's like a real life soap opera playing out in the criminal underworld.
Right.
But, it also makes you wonder if Barnes, facing a life sentence himself, maybe saw this as an opportunity to cut a deal, maybe
Yeah.
lighten his own load by helping the authorities take down a big player like Fisher.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, the source that we've got here, they paint a picture of Barnes as a pretty shrewd operator.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't someone to be messed with.
No, not at all.
So it's definitely plausible that, he saw this as a chance to work the system in his favor.
Exactly, yeah. And it makes you kind of question the reliability of his testimony, right?
Right.
I mean, was he driven by a genuine sense of betrayal, or was he just looking out for himself?
Right. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got this cloud of uncertainty hanging over the whole trial. And in the end, Fisher is convicted.
Yeah.
And this is where the story takes another turn, because even though he ends up behind bars, his legacy, it lives on,
Okay.
and not just in the history books.
Right.
He becomes this figure who's referenced in hip hop music.
Interesting.
Yeah, mentioned by artists like Cameron, Jadakiss, Pusha T, even Gucci Mane.
Wow. So he's like a folk hero in a way.
Yeah, kind of. Even though, obviously his actions were far from heroic.
Right. Yeah. It's more like a cautionary tale, I guess, but also, one that speaks to these complexities of ambition and power and, the realities of the street. Yeah, it's not about, glorifying his crimes, but it's about acknowledging a reality that a lot of artists and their listeners can relate to.
Right, yeah. And I think they're drawn to this kind of, raw energy, that sense of striving for something more.
Right.
Even if the path is, full of danger.
Yeah, it's like these artists are using Fisher's story as a mirror to reflect on their own experiences, their own communities.
Exactly, yeah. It's about drawing on these larger than life figures to create their own narratives, to explore themes of success, failure, betrayal, resilience. And it's not just music, right? His legacy also lives on in film and television. There's a documentary called The Guy Fisher Story, and even an episode of Bet's American Gangster that's dedicated to him.
Wow, it seems like his story has really captured the imagination of filmmakers and documentarians.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, like, why is Guy Fisher, out of all the figures from that era, the one who continues to generate this level of interest?
I think it's the contradictions.
Yeah.
I mean, he was this criminal mastermind, but he also had this passion for music and culture.
Yeah.
I mean, he owned the Apollo Theater.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing that always gets me.
Right. It's not your typical, drug lord profile.
No, not at all.
And I think that's what makes him so compelling.
Yeah.
He challenges our preconceived notions of who these figures are, what motivates them.
Right.
He forces us to look beyond the headlines and grapple with the nuances, with the gray areas. And I think that's what draws people in. We're naturally curious about the complexities of human nature.
Right.
We want to understand how someone can be both, a ruthless criminal and a patron of the arts.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder, like, what his legacy would have been if he had chosen a different path.
Right.
If he had, like, poured all of his energy and ambition into something legitimate. Could he have been, a force for good in Harlem? It's a question we'll never know the answer to, but it's certainly something to think about.
It is, yeah. And it speaks to these larger questions about opportunity, about the forces that shape our choices.
Yeah.
What leads someone down a path of crime versus a path of legitimate success? Are those paths even, mutually exclusive?
Right.
These are questions that resonate far beyond, Guy Fisher's individual story.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about his rise, his fall, his legacy.
Right.
What does it all mean for our listener out there? What are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think it's a reminder that history is never simple.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's complicated, and it's full of individuals who defy easy categorization, you know?
Right.
Guy Fisher's story is a testament to that. He was a product of his environment, a man driven by ambition and shaped by the realities of the street. He made choices, you know, some good, some bad, and ultimately he faced the consequences.
Right.
But you know, his story continues to resonate, to spark conversations, and to make us question our assumptions about the world around us.
I love that, yeah. It's not just about, the facts and figures, but it's about what those facts reveal about human nature, about the choices we make, and the legacies we leave behind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, for me, it's the Apollo Theater thing,
Oh.
It's hard to separate the man from the venue.
Yeah.
Like, does knowing about Fisher's past, does it change how we experience the Apollo, how we feel about the music that was created there?
That's a really interesting question. I think it depends on how you view history.
Right.
Some people might see it as a stain on the Apollo's legacy, this association with a figure from the criminal world, but personally, I think it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I agree. It's not like he turned the Apollo into some kind of, criminal front or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems like he actually cared about the venue.
Yeah?
He cared about its role in the community.
From what we can tell, yeah.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's important to remember that the Apollo, like any institution, it has a complex history.
Right.
It's been through its ups and downs,
Sure.
Financial struggles, changes in ownership.
Yeah.
Fisher's involvement is just one chapter in that larger story.
It's a chapter that makes you think, though.
It does, yeah.
It challenges those easy narratives that we create about good versus evil, success versus failure.
Right.
It's messier than that. It's more complicated.
Absolutely. And that's what makes history so fascinating, right? It's not just about memorizing dates and names.
Yeah.
It's about grappling with these complexities, trying to understand the forces that shape the world we live in today.
And sometimes those forces are unexpected, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that a drug lord would be the one to revitalize a legendary music venue. You wouldn't know. Life is full of surprises.
It is.
And I think that's a good takeaway for our listener. Don't be afraid to question assumptions, to dig a little deeper, to look for those hidden connections, that reveal a more nuanced understanding of history.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Guy Fisher, I'm curious, like what stands out to you, the listener?
Yeah.
What surprised you? What questions are you still kind of wrestling with?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of these deep dives, They spark more questions than they answer.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. It means we're engaging with the material, we're thinking critically.
Right.
We're not just passively consuming information.
Exactly. And that's what we hope to achieve with the deep dive, to spark your curiosity.
Yeah.
To give you a new perspective on familiar topics, and to encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning.
And in the case of Guy Fisher, I think his story is a reminder that even those figures who seem larger than life, who operate in the shadows, they're ultimately human.
Yeah.
They have their motivations, their flaws, their complexities. And by understanding their stories, I think we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves,
Right.
of the world around us.
That's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
So for our listener who's been with us on this journey through the life and times of Guy Fisher,
Yeah.
here's something to ponder as you go about your day. What do you think Guy Fisher's true legacy is? Is it the criminal empire he built? Is it the Apollo Theater?
Yeah.
Or is it something else entirely?
It's a question that deserves more than a simple answer.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of history.
Yeah.
It's open to interpretation, to debate,
Right.
to ongoing exploration.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.